It's day 461 of the war in Gaza, and heavy clashes are ongoing in Beit Hanun. 3 IDF soldiers were killed in a tank blast. The crew members were killed after driving over a booby-trapped pit, causing a massive explosion. Another soldier was seriously injured and evacuated to the hospital. The fallen soldiers were identified as Staff Sergeant Matityahu Perel, age 22, from Beit El; Staff Sergeant Kineo Kassa, age 22, from Beit Shemesh; and Staff Sergeant Nevo Fisher, age 20, from Bruchin. The unit was operating as a reconnaissance force in the ongoing battles against Hamas cells in Beit Hanun. Booby-trapped explosives have become a major threat in the area. The operation began in late December with soldiers uncovering weapon stockpiles and destroying operational tunnels. And yesterday brought tragic news as the IDF recovered the body of a hostage in Gaza. ILTV's Ariel Alachiani is at Tel Aviv's hostage square now with more.
Yes, thank you, Sivan. So heartbreaking news yesterday as the IDF and Shin Bet recovered the body of Youssef Ziadni, an Israeli Bedouin who was taken hostage by Hamas in the October 7th attacks. Now, Youssef's remains were found in a tunnel in Rafah during a complex military operation. And to add to this tragedy, evidence suggests that his son, Hamza, who was taken hostage alongside him, may have met the same fate. Now, Youssef was a father of 18 from the city of Rahat, and he was working at Kibbutz Holit when he, Hamza, and 2 of his younger children were taken hostage. Now, the 2 siblings were released after 55 harrowing days in captivity, raising the family's hopes for the return of Hamza and Youssef. However, this discovery has, of course, left their community in mourning, with relatives describing the grief as immeasurable. The Ziadni family, like so many others, have been shattered by Hamas's October 7th attack. Youssef and his son Hamza were taken alongside Aisha and Bilal, whose release in November brought a brief moment of relief. Youssef's body was found during a military operation in Rafah, near the remains of armed guards. Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani of the IDF noted that findings related to Hamza have raised serious concerns about his fate. Meanwhile, negotiations for a ceasefire and further hostage release continue in Doha, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stating the talks are at a critical juncture. Hamas and Israel remain at odds, but mediators, including Qatar and Egypt, are pushing for progress. Blinken underscored the importance of these talks.
We're very close to a ceasefire and hostage agreement. We've talked about this too in recent days. I hope that we can get it over the line.
And now moving on, House Speaker Mike Johnson has unveiled plans to sanction the International Criminal Court, the ICC, over its contentious arrest warrants targeting Israeli leaders. Mayan Hoffman joins us from near the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem with the latest.
Well, thank you, Sivan. House Speaker Mike Johnson has announced that the House is set to vote on a set of sanctions against the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and its chief prosecutor, Karim Khan. These sanctions come after a decision by the court last year to put out arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Now, the reports are saying that this vote could come as early as today. Johnson criticized the ICC, stating that it lacks jurisdiction over Israel and the United States. He described the arrest warrants targeting Israeli leaders as both outrageous and absurd, accusing the court of equating Israel with Hamas. He emphasized that the House will not tolerate rogue actions that undermine international law. Recall, in May 2024, Khan's office had submitted applications for the arrest of Netanyahu and Gallant, alongside Hamas leaders Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Haniyeh. However, those applications were revoked following the confirmation of the Hamas terrorist's death. The proposed sanctions under the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act initially passed the House in June with bipartisan support, but the bill was then stalled in the Senate under then Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Now, with Republicans controlling both chambers of Congress, the legislation has been reintroduced. If passed by Congress, the legislation would ensure the sanctions remain in place regardless of future administrations. While President Donald Trump could impose sanctions through an executive order, such measures would be vulnerable to reversal by future presidents.
Moving to Israel marks the beginning of a new chapter, and Pitaro Hecht helps you make it truly yours. Transform your home with interiors that blend style, comfort, and timeless design, from luxurious living spaces to thoughtful details. With high-quality craftsmanship at great value, we create spaces where memories are made. For your new life in Israel, choose Pitaro Hecht, where your home begins.
In South Lebanon, the IDF is continuing operations as the 60-day ceasefire heads towards its final weeks. The U.S. is hailing the Lebanese army's implementation of the truce, but Israel called the moves slow and inadequate. More from ILTV, Steve Leibowitz.
U.S. Major General Jasper Jeffers, who heads the ceasefire implementation mechanism, visited Nakora and viewed Lebanese army deployment. He praised the pace of their efforts, even as Jerusalem is threatening to delay the IDF withdrawal beyond the 60 days laid out in the agreement. The U.S. is continuing to indicate its view that the Lebanese army is right on course with the implementation of the 60-day ceasefire agreement with Israel. In the view of the Biden administration, Israel can pull back to the international blue line boundary by the final day on January 26th. Israel insists that the deployment of the Lebanese army to areas left by the IDF have thus far been slow and inadequate. The IDF still remains in much of South Lebanon and continues to operate. The army recovered 200 mortar shells, loaded rocket launchers, and military vests. The soldiers also uncovered a truck containing 3 medium-range rocket launchers. The IDF said it would continue to carry out defensive activities, including neutralizing active threats and dismantling of terrorist infrastructure, all permitted under the current Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire agreement. The IDF Northern Command and Israeli political leaders have expressed doubts that the ceasefire's initial phase will be fulfilled, with the Lebanese army replacing Hezbollah and the IDF withdrawing back to the international boundary by the January 26th deadline.
Lebanon's parliament convened today for a pivotal vote to finally elect a new president and chose Army Chief Joseph Aoun as head of state, a position that was vacant since the last term ended in October 2022. This election comes amid various shifts in the region, including the war between Israel and Hezbollah and the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in the neighboring Syria. On the eve of the vote, French President Emmanuel Macron's special envoy to Lebanon, Jean-Yves Le Drian, met with key Lebanese leaders. Le Drian's presence emphasizes the international focus on this critical juncture for Lebanon as the political stalemate enters its third year. The presidency, reserved for a Maronite Christian under Lebanon's sectarian power-sharing system, has often been a flashpoint for political gridlock. None of the major factions in the 128-seat parliament currently hold the majority needed to elect a candidate unilaterally, making consensus the only path forward. General Joseph Aoun, commander of the U.S.-backed Lebanese army, was elected for president today. He has garnered attention for his leadership during Lebanon's financial collapse and his role in securing continued U.S. support. This vote also marked the first major test of Lebanon's political balance since Hezbollah's setbacks in the war with Israel. Historically dominant in Lebanese politics, the Iran-backed group now faces diminished influence in a rapidly changing Middle East. The nation's new president inherits a legacy of challenges, from economic collapse to regional tensions, but also the hope of leading the country into a more stable future. And joining me now to discuss all of these latest developments is Jonathan Chanzer, Executive Director at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
Let me ask you, could this shift in leadership in Lebanon lead to a reduction in cross-border tensions for Israel, or is Hezbollah's influence too entrenched for any meaningful change?
Well, I think that's the big question with the election of Aoun. We're talking about a man who has spent the last 6-7 years working in the leadership of the Lebanese armed forces. So I think the theory, at any rate, is that we will now add political will and political power to the role of the Lebanese military. The problem is that the Lebanese armed forces are simply not a professional military. They have been unable to keep Hezbollah in check for more than a decade now. I mean, we could actually point back to more than 2 decades. of just fecklessness while the Hezbollah gained power. So the question now of whether the Lebanese armed forces can somehow begin to hem in Hezbollah, that's the big question. It's a theory, it's untested, and we're going to have to see what happens now.
So this is exactly what I'm wondering, with Hezbollah reportedly weakened after the war with Israel and the latest developments and the loss of its Syrian ally, Bashar al-Assad. How do you see its role evolving in Lebanese politics after this election now, after this vote today? Could this weaken its grip on southern Lebanon and the border region with Israel, in your opinion?
Look, that's the hope, right? But I think, we don't bet on hope in the Middle East. It's a tough neighborhood. I will say that the loss of the Assad regime has very likely led to a significant reduction in arms crossing over the border into Lebanon. I'm sure that Hezbollah has fewer resources now, military resources, than it had just a few short weeks ago. On top of that, the cash that would come across the border from Iran has probably dried up. Hezbollah, as we know, has been weakened significantly at a leadership level. The top echelons of Hezbollah are no longer. A lot of the weapons that Israel targeted have not been replenished, and that includes some of the longer distance rockets and PGMs. But really, all of those things don't necessarily translate into a Hezbollah that's unable to exert power in Lebanon. In other words, they still have social infrastructure. They still have light arms. Their rank and file fighters are probably still able, if need be, to tangle with Lebanese armed forces or to threaten or intimidate others that may challenge it in Lebanon. So really what we're walking into right now is the great unknown. There is an attempt here to change the political and military order in Lebanon, with the understanding that we've reached a crossroads. An interesting opportunity now exists for Lebanon to take back the state, but that will require will, it will require bravery, it's going to require leadership, and right now all of those things are untested with Joseph Aoun.
And the elected president, General Joseph Aoun, is a U.S.-backed figure. What were the stakes here for the United States in this presidential election? The administration must be satisfied with the results.
Hey, look, I'm sure that the administration is satisfied. This was the horse that they backed. Amos Hochstein, as we all know, the energy envoy for the Biden administration, has spent a huge amount of time in Lebanon trying to broker kind of a new arrangement. He was certainly successful in getting that 60-day ceasefire, which will end within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so the question is, does the election of Aoun in some way bolster the prospect of having this ceasefire extend beyond late January? Is he the man that can bring about more calm and to keep a lid on the violence, not just between Hezbollah and Israel, but perhaps kind of that broader regional outlook now of, bringing some stability to Lebanon, minimizing the impact of Hezbollah? These were things that Amos Hochstein didn't necessarily spell out in the brokering of this deal, but I'm sure implied in all of this was a longer-term plan to bring some stability to Lebanon.
And moving on to the presidency in the United States, very shortly Donald Trump will officially take office. Is there a chance for a last push for a hostage exchange deal before the presidential turnover, in your opinion?
Well, we're certainly watching that right now. President-elect Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Stephen Witkoff, has apparently been taking meetings with regional actors. He's been delivering the message that the president wants a deal done. It's clear why. I think the last thing that Donald Trump wants is an extended crisis that spills over into his administration. If he can force all of the actors to come to the table and broker a deal, I think that's wonderful news. My question really right now on the hostage issue really is just, will a partial deal suffice, right? We're talking right now about a deal that would likely include 34 hostages. There are reports that I saw this morning suggesting that perhaps 20 of those original hostages are still living. So we're not talking about a large number. They're certainly not going to represent the vast majority of those 99 hostages that are still in the hands of Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. So if a partial deal is done, will that end this crisis, or is it just another stop along the way with a protracted war? I think that is not the optimal outcome here. I do think that President Donald Trump wants an end to all of this, and it's really hard to imagine that with a partial deal.
Jonathan Schanzer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are you eligible for an EU passport? Well, Decker-Peck's levy is helping individuals with the process of obtaining EU citizenship, presenting the opportunity to move, live, and study in all EU countries with no visas or permits needed. Joining me now in studio to discuss this is Michael Decker with more. Thank you for joining.
With pleasure.
So, Michael, who is eligible to obtain Polish citizenship in this case?
Basically, anyone that is a descendant of a Polish citizen potentially is a Polish citizen because Polish citizenship is basically granted by birth. So there may be millions of people around the world that don't know it but could apply for confirmation of Polish citizenship. But there are also probably millions around the world that won't meet these the conditions and the requirements because there are various requirements in order to be able to confirm your Polish citizenship. And
how can someone determine if they meet the criteria necessary for this?
So basically, there are various requirements. For example, the ancestor had to leave Poland after 1920. He wouldn't be able to serve in a foreign arms force. He wouldn't be able to work in any public government position, for example. And therefore, every check will need to be particular and individual in order for us to see if basically the eligibility did not stop at a certain stage, which would prevent the potential clients to confirm his Polish citizenship.
So we're looking a long way back. What happens if someone doesn't have much information or any documents from their ancestors, their grandparents?
First of all, that's usually the case. Most people don't have all the relevant documents. Even sometimes they don't have the birth certificates or very basic documents of the grandparents or great-grandparents. That's usually the level of ancestry we're talking about. So basically our office has a service where we assist with this. We have genealogists in our firm and we help to locate documents in the archives in Poland. And for this, we basically need usually like the full name, date of birth, and city where they resided in Poland, and then we can conduct these searches in Poland and in the countries where they immigrated to afterwards to see if the eligibility wasn't disconnected.
Now, is it possible to apply for citizenship confirmation without a lawyer? Can one do it by themselves?
That wouldn't. First of all, technically speaking, then anyone can represent themselves before the Polish government. As a lawyer, I only basically have the client sign a power of attorney and then I operate on his or her behalf. However, you need to know Polish for starters, because all the application is in Polish. That's one. Secondly, as we explained before, most clients don't have very basic documents. So just for that, you would need like an expert to help locate documents. For example, if we have clients in the US, and their ancestors migrated through Israel and then migrated to the United States, we would need to prove, for example, that they didn't serve in the Israeli IDF, so therefore you need someone here on the ground to contact the IDF and obtain an approval that there was no army service. And thirdly, it's bureaucracy. So you don't want to make mistakes and you want to submit a good application, and therefore I think it's definitely advised to use a lawyer in this process.
Michael Decker, thank you very much for all of this information.
Thank you, with pleasure.
A devastating wildfire, now known as the Eaton fire, continues to ravage parts of Pasadena and Altadena, consuming over 2,000 acres and leaving a trail of destruction. Among the casualties of all of this is the historic Pasadena Jewish temple, reduced to ashes overnight as firefighters battled to contain the fast-moving flames.
The fire, which has scorched over 2,000 acres, is part of a trio of wildfires devastating the communities near Los Angeles. Officials report no containment at this time.
We have over 2,000 acres burning at this time, and the fire continues to grow with 0% containment. We have over 500 personnel assigned, and unfortunately, we have 2 reported fatalities.
For the Jewish community, the loss of the Pasadena Jewish Temple is irreplaceable. The temple served as a sanctuary, a cultural hub, and a Jewish symbol for generations. The synagogue's archives containing decades of records and artifacts are feared lost, and community leaders are already planning efforts to rebuild. The destruction extends beyond the synagogue, with several Jewish-owned businesses and residences heavily damaged or destroyed. Community members are rallying together, emphasizing the importance of unity during this challenging time. The Eaton fire is just one of 3 wildfires in the Los Angeles area. Over 1,000 structures have been destroyed, with resources stretched thin as firefighters battle against time and weather conditions.
And now it's time for our Hebrew Word of the Week. Each week, along with eTeacher, we learn a new Hebrew word and relate it to the Bible, to current affairs, and our everyday lives. For more info on the Rosen School of Hebrew, please scan the QR code on your screen. But in the meantime, let's hear this week's Word of the Week.
Welcome to Hebrew Word of the Week. I'm Mariella, and in this segment, together with eTeacher, we explore the beauty and depth of the Hebrew language. Each week we learn a new Hebrew word or phrase and discover how it's used in the Bible, current events, and everyday life. Today's Hebrew word is atid, which means future. In Hebrew, atid refers not just to what lies ahead in time, but also to potential, possibility, and the hope for what can be. Atid is a word often associated with visions of hope and progress in both biblical and modern contexts. In the Bible, the concept of the future is intertwined with promises, prophecies, and the idea of redemption. The future is not just something that happens, but something to prepare for and aspire toward. In modern Hebrew, atid carries the same significance, often used in discussions about personal goals, national aspirations, and technological advancements. It's a word that evokes excitement and determination for what's yet to come. Here are some examples of how the word atid is used in a sentence. Ha'atid beyadayim shelanu. The future is in our hands. Ani cholemet al atid tov yoter. I'm dreaming of a better future. So if you're interested in learning more about the Hebrew language, check out eTeacher. This online and live course is the most established Hebrew language instruction institution. You can learn with a time-proven method for every level or start from scratch. eTeacher offers dynamic online courses with live video lessons, weekly webinars, and ample support, allowing you to connect with a lively global community for an enriched learning experience. Scan the QR code or click the link below and visit the eTeacher website today to learn more. I hope you enjoyed learning about the word atid. Please join us next week for another episode of Hebrew Word of the Week. And in the meantime, reflect on your own atid. What are your dreams, goals, and aspirations for the future? Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with us in the comments below.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 9 degrees Celsius or 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies are expected alongside temperatures that will reach highs of 19 degrees Celsius or 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures should stay consistent over the weekend. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.